Welcome to Large Learning. Come along with us as we navigate the profound intersection of AI in education and creativity. I'm Cade Greenland, and alongside me as always is the principal of Westbourne Grammar School, Adrian Cam. Today I'm thrilled to bring you a special roundtable discussion with Adrian, myself, and two esteemed figures from Westbourne Grammar School, Associate Principal Teagan Collins and Director of Digital Learning Liam Bassett. We cover a wide range of topics, ranging from the rapid integration of AI into classrooms, its potential to reshape teaching practices, and its profound impact on student wellbeing and learning. We'll delve into the challenges, the opportunities, and the transformative potential of AI in shaping the future of education. So, let's dive in. Hello listeners, welcome to another episode of Future Ready Education. I'm your host, Cade Greenland. I'm joined by Adrian Cam, Principal at Westbourne Grammar School. Today, excited to have two very special guests with us, Teagan Collins, Deputy Principal, and Liam Bassett, Director of Digital Learning. Nice, got that right?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Nailed it.
Both Teagan and Liam are right in the thick of implementing AI and technology into their roles. And I know that we're going to have a really wonderful discussion around that, but also interested in diving into topics around student wellbeing, the idea of education and learning, and how this technology is going to affect all those elements of young people's lives. Keen to jump in? Let's go.
Well, Kurzweil predicted back in the early 2000s that in 2037, that's when the first AI will be smarter than the human brain. And then he extrapolates, and I think it's only 5 to 10 years after that, that the cost of an AI smarter than a human brain will be, it'll decrease exponentially to a cost of about 1 cent. You know, and so by that time we've demonetized AI because it doesn't cost anything, and we've decentralized it because everyone will have one in their pockets. And it's a really fascinating thing to think about when we start looking at what does the future of AI look like and what are the implications for schools. We all know that the hype surrounding AI was probably driven really by the launch of ChatGPT, through OpenAI in November last year. And it really sort of put AI on the map, I guess, so to speak. And we've seen some extraordinary developments in a short period of time since, with the tools being launched almost daily.
It's very much like a where were you moment.
Right. Yeah.
Where were you?
Yeah.
Dad?
And it's integrated so seamlessly already.
Yeah.
It seemed like such a foreign concept, and already we're seeing it within classrooms, we're seeing it in home lives. It's informing what we do next, it's informing what we do now. It just happened overnight, but it's already part of the fabric in a lot of ways, more than we think.
That was a catalyst for this whole exercise, right? It's like how do we discuss its implications when it's happening now, and we're kind of chasing the car down the road trying to stop it rolling down the hill. But as educators, leaders in your school context, that's what we wanted to really talk about. Like how have you seen it coming into the classroom, into your work life as well, and how do you rapidly create policy, create guidelines, create learning and opportunity for students when I'm sure you've got a full slate of curriculum demands already, and all of a sudden it's this mode shift. How have you? It's been literally 6 months. I mean, when did you start kind of talking about it as a faculty?
Well, I remember we were in our digital transformation committee meeting in November, I think it was, and Adrian had sent through a message to me and said, "Have you seen this online?" And I said, "Yeah, I saw this about 2 days ago." And it was ChatGPT, and I think at that time it really was that where were you moment, because I was looking at it and I was like, well, hang on, like I was really taken aback because personally I'd spent some time looking at generative AI, and I think we had looked at report writing tools early last year, and it was in its very early stages, and even then I was thinking this is probably still years away before it's realistically able to be used. And then we introduced it to our committee, and we've got about 20 staff members who have opted in to be a part of our digital transformation committee. And we introduced it to them, just said, hey, check out this new tool. And there was this energy and excitement around it. And I think initially there is that energy and excitement because it goes, look at the end product it can produce. Look, it can create this. Look what it can do. And I think we modelled around a thought leadership article, didn't we? And you were saying, look, we can create this. Whereas now, as you were saying, Teagan, it's coming out of November from last year, really taking that step back now and going, okay, it can create this, but let's really understand it. Let's understand how it can be used as part of our teaching practice. And we know now it's so much more than just putting in one prompt, producing something and going, great, this is fantastic. It's so much more.
Yeah, that's right. And the dialogue's really elevated, I guess, here with us, but also at the school. And I remember that time as well, Liam. I think you asked me to come in and say a few words by way of thanks for the people involved in the Digital Transformation Committee. And you said, and don't worry about your speech because I've already got ChatGPT to write it for you. So, I guess that's where it started, right? And it's really evolved since then. But I guess that excitement, we harnessed that, didn't we? And we said we're not going to hide away from this thing. We're going to really embrace this. We're going to lean into it, and we're going to figure out how tools like ChatGPT and AI more generally can be used to enhance the teacher experience, to look for ways to provide efficiencies in their practice, but also to create deeper insights into individual students and their needs. But on the flip side, also for students to be able to engage with these tools to learn how to learn and to learn how to do things better. And so we all discussed, didn't we? And we said, okay, well, let's spend some time on day one of 2023, the first day of the school year. Teachers are back. What are we going to do? And so we thought, let's talk about it. And so that conversation has really started from there. But I remember, Liam, when I think it was you and I think Teagan, it was you, but it was also our Director of Teaching and Learning talking about it in different ways. And there was a sense of excitement in the room, wasn't it? So we had 200 staff in the room, and there was sort of this gasp, and there was this buzz, and there was sort of just this openness and excitement around, this is pretty good. How are we going to make this work? Yeah, that was a real moment, I think.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
And you said this is a paradigm shift, and we surveyed staff at the time, even just by raising your hand, and I think there was a smaller percentage of staff that had heard of it, but by the end of that day, people walked away having an understanding of what generative AI was and what these next few months might entail. And of course, it's not giving all the answers and all the solutions on day one, but really providing that groundwork to say, look, this is something that we need to consider and to think deeply about over these coming months and in the future ahead.
It's really embracing, coming back to your comments, Liam, and also what you said earlier, Kate, it's embracing what we believe as a school in education, what we believe our teachers, the knowledge that they bring. It's not, teachers are not the source of all knowledge. We demystifying and debunking that feeling that the teacher has to stand up the front of the room and know everything and give all the answers. The young people in our classrooms, their minds and where we want them to go in their creativity, it's really embracing that with AI. And it's not going in with, yes, there's ethical implications and yes, there's things that we have to consider. And of course, as experienced educators, they're the conversations that we grapple with and that we need to have. And we bring our students and community along for the ride. I know that we've released a lot of commentary to our community when it was first out there. And of course there's concerns about assessment and what does this mean, and can a student write an essay, and how do I know if it's original thought or if it's generative AI. But it's taking a step back, which we're trying to encompass and inspire in all of our educators. You're not always the source of all information. It's about that critical thinking and about challenging that young person's mind to say, okay, so you've been able to source this information, where to next? Or what are you missing? Or where are the gaps? And it was on that first day, that was really our message, wasn't it, when we presented it to staff? It was, you don't need to know this inside out. We don't need to be experts in AI, but let's think about it critically. How do we harness it? How do we leverage it? How do we use it in our classrooms to be able to enhance the educational experience and critical thought for our young people? And I know that we have lots of conversations about that, because it's scary for educators when we're taught all the way through our initial teacher education, knowledge is power, and we're the most knowledgeable in our subjects, and we're vocationally connected to that source of identity, really. But it's almost letting go of everything that we've learned to be better educators.
That identity piece is so important. You know, I think it's really important for schools, for teachers, for those that work with young people to have an identity of becoming. And, you know, to understand that, you know, learning is lifelong, you know, to use the cliche, but it really is. And I think we need to be able to model that to students. You know, I think gone are the days where we are imparting our wisdom onto people, and, you know, we're the beholders of all the knowledge that they need to understand. That's, I don't think, ever been the case, you know, or it hasn't been the case for many, many years. So we absolutely need to move away from that. I remember when I was in university, this maths lecturer, he was a genius, but he used to drive me absolutely crazy because he would actually model that. He would model the learning, he would model the struggle. Now, I didn't know it at the time because he wasn't explicit about what he was doing, so I just thought he was an idiot. And he didn't... I thought he didn't know what he was doing, because he'd be up on the board and he'd be trying to work something out, and he'd be working through an equation, and then he'd be rubbing it out, and then he'd be stepping back and he'd be looking at it and be looking around, and then he'd be looking at it. And, you know, 5 minutes had passed and I'd be like, oh my God, you know, what's this guy doing? And I thought that all the way through the course, right up until the end, and didn't have a lot of respect for him. But looking back on him now, that was really powerful stuff.
And so, Professor Spencer, this is Adrian Cannon sending his apologies for thinking you're an idiot.
Sorry about that.
But it connects. We've seen that in our junior school with one of our junior school teachers, Jonathan Hannett, and the work of his class. You could probably both speak to it more than I.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Yeah. I remember now. The micro bits.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's that idea of creating meaningful context for learning, and then actually getting out of young people's way, getting out of students' way. And so in the class, there was a lot of circuitry, you know, micro bits. There was
coding and...
there was computers, there was simple materials, and there was some provocations. And then the role of the teacher then is to actually step back, let students take things in the directions that they want to go, to embrace the struggle, so to speak, and to be engaging in learning about learning, and to be engaging in learning about what they need to know at that point in time to be able to solve whatever challenge or problems in front of them.
Through Montessori.
Very much.
Just in time.
Very much.
Just in time, yeah.
And so what happened was the teacher then acts as a mentor and as a guide, and it still has a valuable role in that process in terms of the wisdom and experience they have, and being able to guide and direct and assist at different times. But the students really embraced it, and they got into it, and they started asking questions, and they started figuring out ways to do things that they didn't know before. But then they decided that they were going to attempt to do something that no one had done before, and they were essentially looking at two different micro bits and being able to transfer, I think, sound waves between one to another. And so they figured out a way to do it, and they actually contacted Microsoft and said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but, you know, this is what we've just done. And Microsoft wrote back and they said, well, we had no idea that could actually be achieved. Well done. And then they added that to their knowledge base, you know, so... But
the even more interesting part, when you talk about your professor and how you thought, oh, he's got no idea what he's talking about, and the interesting part of observing that learning was that the students asked the teacher, do you think we can do this? And the teacher, he said, I don't know, but let's find out. And traditionally, a teacher potentially could have said, oh no, can't do that, or oh, you weren't able to find anything, so let's move on.
I've asked Microsoft, they said it's not possible.
They said no, so he said reach out to Microsoft and ask them. So the students then wrote to Microsoft and they said, no, actually we don't have any evidence of this being able to be possible. And instead of the teacher then saying, oh okay, let's move on,
That's not possible.
That's not possible, he challenged them and said, okay, so how are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah.
And it's that real facilitation and struggle which was evident in that. to get the outcome.
And that's the shift that needs to take place in education, right? And it's something that we're all passionate about here, and we actively promote, and I think we do a fantastic job. Not to say what we do is perfect, because there's always room for improvement. But I think increasingly we're doing a great job of that. We're saying, yeah, okay, we have a curriculum here, but let's not be beholden to that curriculum. Let's not. It's not a something we need to. It's not prescriptive. It's not something we need to follow in a lockstep fashion. We can think about that, but there's ways to approach the curriculum in different ways that promotes character and agency in our students, and it's okay just to deviate from time to time. It's okay to create some space and some time to experiment, to explore, to go off on tangents, to delve down rabbit holes. That's where the deep learning takes place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And James Nottingham's learning bit, alludes to that, right? The students sitting in the struggle, going through it and feeling like, I can't do this. I don't know the answer. And I think even for me as a teacher, it's always having to remind myself too that I don't have to give the answer, as you said, Teagan. And you mentioned before, the teacher getting out of the way of learning and saying, I don't know, let's find out together. Even if I do know the answer and can tell you right away, don't let the learning actually occur.
And it's not to say that our teachers are not experts in their field, because they absolutely are. But that's why teaching will never be replaced by generative AI, because it's the acknowledgement of, never say never, but but it's that acknowledgement of, it's not just knowledge. What our teachers do in our classrooms, in our learning environments with our young people, it's not just imparting knowledge, it's knowing when to challenge, it's knowing when to step back, it's knowing when to critically inquire or allow the struggle. It's so much more than this is what we're doing today. These are these are our learning outcomes, these are our intentions, this is the curriculum, this is what we're assessing on. And I know that we all know that, but just our teachers are experts. But it's more than expert knowledge.
And question though.
Yeah.
How do you then go from this, learning utopia that you're creating, where it's participatory and it's about the struggle, and then you send the Year 12 students out the door into the job market, into tertiary education, and the expectation is that there has been at least an expectation of meeting a certain standard, or having a list of credentials or a score, like heaven forbid, at the end of the day. Is it something that you're mindful of? And obviously in the context of this kind of AI movement, revolution that's happening, how I guess is that preparing students to face that, first the reality now and then the reality tomorrow?
They're not mutually exclusive concepts, right? So we've got everything that we've just been talking about. Of course, foundational numeracy, literacy, just-in-time knowledge is really important to the work that we do. That's never going away, because we still need to be able to, in conversations in the moment, be able to construct sentences, be able to form paragraphs, emails, phone conversations. That's never disappearing, and that's a fundamental belief of the work that we do, whether it's from our Reggio approach in our early learning and in our younger years of primary, up until the inquiry approach that we take to extend on that through junior and then up into our middle school and then into our senior years. It's really about building on their capacity and their critical thinking and critical thinking skills, but also it's developing that resilience in failure that is not only connected to holistic student development, and we can talk about the wellbeing benefits of that, but also in being good learners, which is a transferable skill to university, TAFE, an apprenticeship, to working at the local cafe, wherever that takes them. It's about the combination of both of those. One doesn't sit separate to the other.
I couldn't agree more. I love that, and I think that's 100% what we're all about here at the school. And I think it's not mutually exclusive. And in fact, I think this approach sets them up for life to be more successful, because they're able to deal with any challenge that's put in front of them, because they're not going to shy away from those challenges. But it's interesting to think about that in relation to AI, because we're talking about there's power in the struggle and there's power in going off on tangents, and in many ways, with AI or IA, as some people are saying, instead of artificial intelligence, have an IA, which is an intelligent assistant, in your pockets, which we all will very soon, what does that do to the struggle? Does that enable students to still really struggle with something, or does it take that away because they can find an answer to whatever problem that they've got just by typing something into one of the platforms? And what does that mean for learning?
I think that's where metacognition comes in, and students having a really acute understanding of how to learn effectively. And so I think...
Can you just say what's metacognition?
Having that acute understanding of how humans learn, really. And so, am I describing it? And do you want to add anything to that too?
No, go out on the limb. That was great.
Thinking about thinking.
Thinking about thinking,
Right.
right. And I think we're seeing that become so important in schools now, where students have to have an understanding of how to learn. And school, absolutely looking at the foundational skills, but learning how to learn. And so when we include generative AI as part of that, it's a part of that piece. So students knowing that, okay, we've got this tool here, and it's going to keep evolving, it's going to keep developing, but now we still need to use this in a way that helps us to learn. What I've really appreciated over these last couple of months with even something like ChatGPT is being able to personify it as a learning assistant, as a learning facilitator. So rather than going in and saying, hey, I want you to write a creative writing piece, say, hey, I'm going to, you're an educator and I want you to teach me how to write creatively. I want you to teach me some figurative language techniques. Here's the start of what I've written so far. What are some of the techniques that I could add on from this, and could you use some examples? And then all of a sudden it's actually teaching me how to write a really fantastic creative writing piece, rather than, I've got homework that's due tomorrow, Mr. Bassett's asked me to write a creative writing piece, can you spit one out? It needs to be 800 words. So moving away from producing the outcome, but actually scaffolding that learning and showing students how to do that, so that they understand why we've got to learn in that way.
The real surface level conversations around this is how do we prevent students from plagiarising work, and then how do we assess this, and how do we authenticate it? And I think, that's really low level, because I think if we can design assessments to really capture students' imaginations, where things like ChatGPT can be used as research assistants or learning assistants, well then aren't we making the conditions for better for learning? And I actually believe that, so it was probably a rhetorical question. But
Yes.
Fascinating that we were seeing articles. I think that was before the term break, and then over the term break, we were circulating articles where this university's banned ChatGPT, and this school's banned ChatGPT because of the plagiarism. And isn't it fascinating how that sense of control came in so quickly to education, and we've got to protect the structures and the institution and the validity here.
it will create a bigger divide, I think, between those who know how to use this well to assist and enhance their learning, and those who do not have access. But I think even universities now, I think, are quite liberal in their approach to this, and I'm seeing some really interesting guidelines and policies being developed and published around the use of these sorts of tools in universities. Even Harvard, for instance, in one of their degrees, computer computation and programming, I think it's called, there's still a professor who gives lectures, but instead of the tutor model, they've created their own version of a chatbot, which is a learning assistant to assist and guide students through their assignments and through their learnings, which I think is really progressive and probably an indicator of where we're going more broadly with this sort of stuff.
Just giving us the perfect segue to talk about the fears associated with these kind of models and how they can make decisions, or they come to conclusions that don't take into consideration our morality or our humanity. We've even seen it with AutoGPT, these models that lay up agents that can chain up together and just go off and perform things on their own. That's probably an early example of what's to come when we've got truly autonomous models that can make decisions. Liam, you wanna...
Yeah, well, it's interesting because those hallucinations are quite interesting, and that's what they colloquially call them, right? But the artificial intelligence, as you're talking to it, it's almost going on a bit of a tangent, and it's getting confused. And I think there was lots of discourse around that at the time, going, oh well, there we go, it's not useful. Look at it, it's hallucinating. Yeah. And what you mentioned there, Kate, is interesting, because you're saying, it's what's morally and ethically right if that produces something, and it's been interesting to have those discussions around. Well, actually, it's actually holding up a mirror. on society, and it's causing society to reflect too and say, well, look, if it's actually putting things out that are detailing things associated with discrimination or prejudice or sexism, and we've seen that with generative AI image generators, for example. And if you're typing in things like show me an image of a doctor, and it producing an image of someone who is stereotypical of what a doctor looks like. So it's actually holding up a mirror to society, and so there's those questions around, okay, well, this is actually projecting what we view to be a doctor, or to be emblematic of the things that we're putting in. So it's certainly something to unpack and to consider, but those are the long-term discussions around, how do we know what is right and wrong?
And hasn't that been developed, as you say, it's reflected on society? So is AI the problem, or is society the problem? And are we seeing AI as the we're fearful of it? Isn't the moral impetus in society to improve, so that the reflection of whatever's being developed in the future is reflective of a true society, humane society in which we want to be? Because we can all talk about how we're fantastic citizens of society, but let's expand our thinking a little bit to all cross sections of society.
Yeah, you're 100% right, and I think it's that bias that needs to be really carefully considered as we go on this journey. I think who's creating these tools, who are they creating them for what use, and what data is being fed into these AIs to be able to train them for them to learn and for them to become more sophisticated. And we know that there's inherent biases in all of that, and so how do we make sure that we're checking, we're putting in checks and balances for those sorts of things to enable what you've just been talking about, Teagan. I think I want to go back to what you were talking about before, Liam, about how we can use AI in a learning environment, in a traditional classroom, to enhance the learning experience. And you were talking about turning ChatGPT, for instance, into giving it a persona and giving it a specific task, almost like as a learning assistant, as a tutor. How's that played out in the classroom, and how have students reacted to that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'm fortunate to teach a Year 12 English class, and they're an awesome group, and if they're listening, they'll probably they'll know that I tell them this all the time. But we've had some really nice discussions about ChatGPT, and I think there's a transparency piece that educators need to consider too, to actually say, talk about it with your students. How are you using it? Why are you using it? Okay, let's talk about it. But I've been able to model it for my students too, and even very early in the start of the year. And I think this was a bit of a penny drop moment for me, where a student was asking how to use semicolons in their writing, and so they had sent this to me as a message, Microsoft Teams. I thought, right, I'm going to sit down for 20 minutes and I'm going to write how you use semicolons in your sentence. And honestly, it probably would have taken me 20-30 minutes, and I was able to use ChatGPT to say, look, well, I'm a Year 12 English teacher, and I've had a student who's asked me how to use semicolons in their writing. Here's an example of a paragraph that they've written so far, and I've taken their name out, so it's all anonymous. And I said, look, I want you to explain it to them in a way where it provides some examples. It does it in a really structured way, a really articulate way. And what it produced genuinely was significantly better than what I would have written in the past and what I have written in the past. And so even for me as a teaching assistant, being able to use it as a teaching assistant, and now that becoming a learning assistant to the student. So I was able to show it to the student, say, hey, just letting you know, everything that I've just given you here was created by generative AI. You can do the same steps that I've done here to actually learn. Now, again, I'm here to help and support you, absolutely. But if you've got questions like this at home, don't feel like, it's 9 o'clock at night, I can't contact my teacher. You've actually got a learner assistant right here, and you can follow these same prompts.
And the important thing...
Liam Bosch.
The Liam Bosch. Yeah, awake 24/7.
The important thing there is that next step of, so they've got the information, they've been able to digest it. The question then comes back to you. It facilitates a much more meaningful conversation and learning of what's next then. So where are you using this within your essay? Where is it best placed? Why would you use it in that? Okay, so you've positioned it here. Why did you do that? Tell me about your thinking. Talk to me about your thought process and that metacognition that we were talking about earlier, rather than just you repeating knowledge and that being the dialogue. It really elevates the potential dialogue in the classrooms.
Yeah, I love that too. I think one of the things that I found using it quite early on when I was in the very late stages of finalising my PhD was looking at it, how I could use it as a research assistant. And I think I discovered its limitations quite quickly in that space, because a PhD by its definition is very niche, and I was asking it to do things that it was probably beyond its capabilities. So it was feeding me back stuff that it just made up, right? And initially I thought, oh, this is great. Hang on, I haven't read that work before by that researcher, and I thought, oh, that quote, perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And then I actually figured out it's just made it up. It's just made it up. And so I think for me that was a really interesting moment in time to make sure that I've got my bullshit detector finally honed, to make sure that I'm thinking critically about what that tool is producing for me. But then I looked at the way that it structured its responses too, and it's very, probably because of the prompts I was using, Liam, and probably not tailoring those to the level that I probably needed to. But if I was just typing in, write me an essay on such and such, it was very structured. It's very formulaic. It'd be like an intro first. Here's this main point. Here's the second point. Thirdly, here's the third point. In conclusion, this is what I've said. And I think that's okay if you're looking for a very structured response. But I think for me, I love talking to students, and I was talking to our Year 12 prefects about it too. Is this a good essay? For me, and for me, it's not. Because it's really mechanical. And so some of the conversations I was having with our students were very much along the lines of, well, this is a starting point. How do we make this better?
It's a good way. It's a good thing to do with the students anyway, to actually produce some exemplars using generative AI, and to then get students to reflect on it. Let's unpack it. Let's look at the strengths, areas for improvement. How would you to actually make this better? And then to have that discussion around it is so valuable for the students too, to understand and to realize, yes, this is generic. It is formulaic. There is the one introduction and the 3-body paragraph and a conclusion. So, well, what's wrong with this, right? We need to move away from that formulaic style of writing. So it provides that opportunity.
We've really been trained to interact with technology in a certain way over the last, let's say, 15 years, 20 years, or even before that, in terms of search being the dominant way that we interact with the internet, and the rise of Google. So we put in a query and we get a response. And even before Google, we were putting in queries in certain ways because we know that we have to tailor the question so that we get a specific set. And Google's got better and better at delivering us the best, the near best answer to our problem. And it's now become they're delivering us the best ad for the question that we have. And I think we're still applying that to this world, to this product of ChatGPT, and it is a product. It's designed to give us a really satisfactory answer and also a joyous experience. And so it doesn't say no, or it rarely says no. It's like, yes, I can do that, and it will make something up if it doesn't know. But we have to learn how to use the technology in a new way. We can't expect it to be just a question answer bot. And the big unlock for me using it in our work at Chorus was treating it as another team member, talking to it like another team member.
Yeah.
Using all of those using the language that we do with another human, because that gives a nuance and a personality to the conversation. And so when you're getting formulaic responses, it's because it's treating it like a cold database, when really it's got all of the color and nuance of our language in the model. And so it'll unlock if you're able to use it in that way.
If you're able to ask the right question. And we talk about that all the time. Are we asking the right questions? Are our young people, are they able to access the right question to stimulate the provocation that they're thinking about? So even with ChatGPT, if we don't put the right question in, it's not going to potentially spit out what we're after. But even it's seeing, isn't it, learning as a continuum. There's no end product. So it spits something out. Okay, yes, we've got a introductory paragraph. That's not the end. What's the next step? Where's the overlay of thought to see how can I improve this? How can I make it better? What is it telling me that I didn't already know? How am I reflecting on this learning? And isn't that, it circles back to what we were talking about earlier about that visible learning? A bit of a buzzword. Sorry, educators probably cringe as I've just said that. But it's really important to think about.
The thing I think about is how does it change our relationship with technology, which is, I think, is what you've both alluded to then in your thoughts. For me, it's hearing that you've almost treating that tool as a team member.
Well, one of my big ambition of in terms of what we're building at Chorus, I want to build an AI writers' room, and so have all of the different skills represented, or the different backgrounds represented in that room, and have the ability to put a creative provocation there, or a concept of a film, or a client's challenge, and have a team essentially of agents that can work with us to augment our team. So we work with a small team, but the ability to have true representation of diversity with these different agents in the room with us.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
I love that. That's amazing, and I think that's a really that's a fantastic vision, and I think that's ultimately where we're heading. We're going to have new forms of connection, new ways of working, with agents, with AI.
We need to come up with a dim word agents, because it's a bit too matrix.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's the same as AI. Like we're throwing around AI like it's this one thing, right? But it's an umbrella term, and there are so many different areas underneath that umbrella. Neural networks and machine learning, and so many different areas of speciality that go into creating what we call AI. But I think for me, it's around, we're going to form relationships with these things, and what does that mean moving forward? At the moment, we're just calling them learning assistants or intelligent assistants or agents, or, but are they going to be more than that in the future?
And I would hope that they would be.
Yeah.
And I love that idea that you have a team of diverse AI agents that are actually supporting it and helping you with that. And I think this year in particular, I used to use Siri, and I still use Siri all the time, and it's so jarring now talking to Siri. It seemingly can do nothing. And I basically just use it for reminders now, and even then she's messed up. But I would love it if and I'm sure this will happen, to be able to personify and characterize this AI assistant in my phone that I could talk to, and give them that diverse school of thought, and to have a team of different people I can tap into. And
it's important when you think about this, we can't think of it as if this happens, I can't wait till this.
It is.
This is the more than logical progression of where we're at.
I think it's 12 months away?
It'd have to be.
Yeah.
And I think with Microsoft in that space now, with Microsoft Copilot, embedding artificial intelligence into their Edge search engine, for example, where it provides sources and cites the information where it comes from. You've got Google with Google Bart. I mean, Apple has to be doing something right now, I'm sure. Have been doing something, I'm sure.
Well, you're talking about I love watching movies, but you're talking about the AI assistant for Iron Man, aren't you? What was its name?
Oh, I can't remember.
Do you remember its name?
So you think of Iron Man. I think of
Jarvis.
Because I think of the movie Her. Have you seen the movie Her, where he's got
he's got his has her peeking out through his phone.
Oh, really?
And around so she can see the world. And
it's amazing. And he forms this relationship with her.
Incredible.
But it's this absolutely fantastic movie. And look, there's a scene or two in there which a little bit jarring in hindsight when you watch it back, which maybe a little bit inappropriate. But it's really interesting, because you go, I can see people forming those relationships and having them as an assistant, but all of a sudden, there are those broader questions now going, well, if you have this really strong connection with artificial intelligence, I mean, what does that mean for humanity?
And I think, for me, it's always this thing around, some of our listeners, I'm sure, will be saying, well, that's not possible. That'll never happen. AI is never going to have emotion, for instance. And maybe they're right. But I think what AI will be able to do is it will be able to simulate emotion to a really high level that we won't be able to comprehend the difference.
I was thinking after our last episode that we filmed and going away and reflecting on it, and my background's as an actor, a lot of my friends are trained as actors, and a big part of what we do is the thing that really hooked me when I was studying at VCA was we'd spend weeks researching, say, Chekhov. And we'd go back into the Russian Revolution, we'd do Russian dance, and we'd read literature from that era, and so we could embody the human experience of that time and represent it as part of the play. And it was all just a simulation of those characters. It was all representing emotion, and it wasn't, I guess, just displaying that. It was building these characters so that the audience could connect and see themselves in that. And it's what the transformation has been with ChatGPT is that we've got this thing that somewhat represents our conversational style, and we can see it's all of a sudden it's got a personality. Siri, for example, has got a human voice, and it's able to articulate things in somewhat natural language, and that was a huge unlock. Like, we're already so far down that track that it's not a question of will it or won't it, or could it ever. It already does. It's all a matter of like how much of that space are we going to allow it to have in our lives,
And it's happening really quickly. And I think you spoke about it at the very start in terms of you're not going to realise one day that there's this big shift. It just happens. Like you've seen it with the Snapchat AI bot that just was pushed out to every single person that had Snapchat at the top of their feed. You could name it, you could give it an avatar and a face. The application Replica, which you can access online and on your phone as well, it's very much you form these relationships with a person, and that's been happening for years, and that is built on artificial intelligence. So it very much already exists and will continue to exist. And I think of that. Online dating, I probably wasn't around when it was first introduced, but my understanding is that, it was a little bit, people were quite judgmental towards it. I think, you're not forming those real connections. Whereas now, I think it's exactly, like I'm not going to a bar, like I'll just, I'll message them from my couch. And I think we'll probably see that with forming those relationships with AI too, in a way where it, as you mentioned, Kate, kind of unlocks a part of you, doesn't it? You being able to see that, to have someone empathise with you, and all of a sudden you're learning more about yourself through that connection.
I missed that whole thing as well, Liam. that whole online dating thing.
Did you?
I missed it. So,
I gave it a go a little bit in uni, but I think I'm past it now. And even then, look, probably 2012, for example, there was still like, oh, really? You're catching up with them? You haven't met them before? Whereas now, it's so normal. I
reckon if it had been a few years later, a few years earlier, I would have been right into it. But I'm
opting out.
So you're just putting your phone away.
Some of the work that I do in the digital space, in metaverse and Web3, we do call it this decentralized agency, because we've got creatives around the world that do work for clients, and there's every chance that some of them aren't real, to be honest. Like there's functions that they play. There's in terms of Twitter and a lot of the social media. There's a high degree of possibility that some of those aren't human beings on the other side of that conversation, because it's been designed or it's been something that's been programmed, and that's just a reality that we're in. And I think maybe it's an interesting place to throw to you, Teagan, around wellbeing, because I know that's a big passion of yours in terms of your role at Westbourne, but then also beyond that. How do we face the challenges of well-being in that sense, but then also what is some of the unlocks that the technology gives us for supporting student well-being?
It's a really good question, and something that Liam and I actually talk about quite a bit with some of the tools we're using with our students at the moment through Microsoft Reflect and some of the data that we get and insights that we get and from that. So tools that allow daily check-ins, for example. So you'll be able to, as a teacher, you can set up a daily reflection or a check-in for your students. You can ask them a number of different questions. You can pick questions that are pre-populated, or you can put your own question in. And it's all about elevating our emotional literacy, being able to name and place emotions, which is really critical, as we know, in emotional understanding and being able to self-identify emotions and then be able to take that next step of what's next. How do I deal with this emotion? How do I process this emotion? How do I feel? What does this mean for me? And then what do I have in my toolkit of strategies to be able to deal with that? Not always dealing with it is the hard part is acknowledging it and sitting with it. But I think that's another tangent for a later conversation. But we're already seeing the data that we can collect to push out from an internal reflection. And, it's not necessarily anything that we weren't already doing, but it might be a journal. Or it might be, some people still have their own personal journal where they might be reflecting on daily gratitude or naming emotions that they feel. And this is not uncommon in schools all around Australia, all around the world. But what this potentially AI is allowing us to do is to be able to build and gather on our personal data that we're inputting to then give us trends and insights into a flag potentially for a teacher to say, you've got a student in your class who's reported concerning or worrying signs, their risk protective factors are really low, we need to step in here and have a conversation. Now that happens quite organically in schools, or schools with really strong wellbeing programs and strong connections with their young people and mentoring programs in place, or we have a mix of tutor and mentor here, and wellbeing is everybody's responsibility. So it's not just the responsibility of the mentor or the tutor. So there's lots of different avenues to check in on young people. We notice that something's off, or they're sharing a mentoring conversation and we go, oh, that's a little bit of a red flag. I'm going to follow up here with this student. But this just adds another layer of depth. And we do surveys with our young people. We particularly use the Youth Resilience Survey to be able to make sure that our wellbeing program is not just it's the right kind of reactive. So of course we want our wellbeing programs to be proactive, but it's also that important reactivity when we get that yearly snapshot of data to say, okay, we notice in the Year 9 cohort that our risk protective factors are really low. It could be in relation to risk-taking behaviours, for example. So we need to inject some more of that perhaps a little bit earlier than what we were planning in our curriculum. But that's once a year. It's a snapshot in time. We could talk about NAPLAN and PAT testing and all of those modes, which is also another conversation for another time. But how do we get those insights on a daily basis? And that's, I think, really the exciting part of where this technology is taking us, and we're already using some of this in our classrooms at the moment with our young people. But in 6 months' time, will we potentially be able to generate a report? It's anonymised at the moment, but in time, will we be able to see a snapshot of the ebbs and flows? And there's lots of different tools out there which do that, but it's quite system-based, so the school has to implement it. How do we decentralise that so it's the autonomy of the young person? So it's something that, I'm sure we all have tools on and apps on our phones for daily check-ins and, gratitude journals. But it's more than that. Yeah. It's taking it to that next layer and that next step of proactive wellbeing.
Absolutely.
I love that too. And that's the premise of AI, isn't it? Enabling schools and teachers to make faster, better, more informed decisions to support every single person in their school. Are we worried about that at all? Like, is there a flip side to this? Like, I think the premise is brilliant, and I think it's what we should all be aiming for. What's the flip side of that? When we talk about the datification of society, and we all know from our own experience, using social media, and the algorithms that are generated for us based on our, what we view and what we like.
All you need to do is start a new social media account and see what dribble you get served when it's just starting off to know this, that's the inherent bias, right?
One of my greatest fears is that people see this, particularly in staying on the wellbeing track, is that schools see that, okay, great, that's it, that's our puzzle piece for wellbeing, there it is. it's so much more than that. And we talk about some of the tools that we use in our spaces and learning environments. It's an option. It doesn't replace the conversation. It doesn't replace the check-in. It's a point of reflection for the student first and foremost, because that reflective nature of being able to build our emotional intelligence and be able to build our reflective thought, notice our emotions, notice how we're feeling, is so critical to their formation of self, their formation of self-identity and who they are, and allowing that development of that element of holistic development for young people. We're not just shaping learners, we're shaping holistic young people to be able to take that into the next phase of their lives, wherever they do. So it's not the answer. It's not just
it's not a tick of the box.
Not a
that's
tick
our
of the
wellbeing
box.
program.
No,
it's so much
absolutely.
more. Yeah.
And that's why it's not mandated to say everybody must do a check-in at 8 a.m, 8:30 in the morning when you get in, because it's the teacher read on what's happening in my space. What am I going to talk about for the next 15 minutes in Mentor? It's one element, and it's not the data that's necessarily the critical point. That could be a benefit.
Yeah.
What the critical point is, it's allowing a tap in into that young individual to be able to stop and pause. It's like disguised mindfulness to a degree, because it's enacting with them in a way that feels really comfortable. For us, it might not be as comfortable because we didn't have technology at our fingertips like our young people do and have grown up with. We all see those TikTok and Instagram videos of toddlers talking to Siri or Hey Google, and they're at the cafe or they're in the supermarket because they're growing up with that. So we have to think about and assimilate to what's going to connect with them to allow us to have the best conversation and build the best wellbeing program that we possibly can and support. You're really passionate about this, Liam.
Oh, I am. But I think everything you said there, really resonates with me, and I think you're so right. I mean, the students, of course, they're growing up with their devices now, and we're there to support them and to say, look, here's how we can use technology in a really meaningful and a powerful way. And I think that's why, I advocate for mobile phone usage in a purposeful way. Same thing with technology, and if it's not, well, then we don't need it. I really like there's an app on the phone, it's called How We Feel. And it was released about a year ago now. It stems from the research from Mark Brackett, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And you're able to check in, you check in on a mood meter, you're building that emotional literacy, as you said, that emotional intelligence, and it provides you with some strategies. And we'll see it, and we're already seeing it now, where artificial intelligence then goes, hey, you're feeling anxious at the moment. Here are some strategies. You were actually feeling anxious the same time last week.
If they're not in our learning environments ready to learn, we know, research tells us, we can't access it. If they're feeling anxious, if they're feeling stressed, if they haven't had enough sleep, if they don't, if they can't identify how they're feeling, be able to self-regulate. If something's happened online the night before and they're not feeling comfortable to be able to go, Miss Collins, I'm feeling really frustrated at the moment, and this is how it's impacting me. If we can't unlock those conversations, then we're really doing a disservice to the next generation.
Yeah, well, that's central to our teaching and learning philosophy, Inspire, and within that is our approach to wellbeing, which is titled Care, and I think you've beautifully encapsulated and that in that. And I think in our teaching and learning philosophy, we have two main focus areas. So developing young people with character and instilling them with a sense of agency. And I think that's the next piece in all this discussion around AI as well, which not many schools, from my experience, are delving into. But we are, Liam, with the launch of the AI Academy, for instance, which is very central to our approach to education, which is, yes, we need to learn how to use these things to the best of our ability to enhance what we do, but we also need to understand how they work. Because if we understand how they work, we can make sure that students who are so inclined or interested understand that they do have agency over the technologies at their disposal, and they can be the creators of tomorrow's technology today. So they don't just have to use something that's been developed and designed by someone else. They can actually start creating their own AI tools and platforms to do specific things. So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the work that's started, but also some of the work that's on the horizon around that AI Academy concept?
Can you give me like a brief overview of what it is?
So I guess Adrian and I, we've been speaking about an AI Academy at Westbourne Grammar School, and of course it is in response to generative AI, but having that a set of different options for students and for staff, and also for parents too, to equip them with the skills and the knowledge of how artificial intelligence works, what it means, and how we can use it effectively. So even just most recently, I was speaking with our Deputy Director of Maths, Johan, and we were talking about having almost like a micro-credential program for students to enrol in, where they tap into some AI courses to learn about what AI is. For staff, actually providing them with some videos, some resources, running some workshops for them, and the same thing with parents too, where we're actually reaching out to parents and bringing them on that journey, which we've already started. So this AI Academy, at least I envision it, to be this big umbrella thing that brings together so many of the things that we're doing across a school in the realm of artificial intelligence. And so it's not so much of it's an elective subject that we do at this year level, or it's something that we do once a term. It's so much more than that. It's authentic, it's genuine. It's the thing that's happening on a week by week basis in our classrooms and reaching out to the broader community.
It's great, isn't it? And I think some of the work that Johan is looking at doing in the short term is having students develop their own chatbots. So that's a great way to dip your toe in the water of AI, in terms of, okay, so if we're going to create our own chatbot, what does that look like? What do we need to include? What knowledge base is it drawing from? How are we training this chatbot with data, and where does that data come from? And what function is it going to have, and how are we going to modify it and make sure that it continues to improve? And so for me, I think that's a really nice step. And it encompasses a really broad range of skills under that AI umbrella.
It really epitomises and embodies deep and powerful learning. And we always talk about that. That's what we want to achieve. But just using tools and products, it has its limitations. We need, and whether it's in any discipline, that's really what needs to permeate.
And Liam, you're doing some work with the new subject that you're launching next year in Year 9 around futures thinking, and that's going to incorporate AI.
Yeah.
But it's also going to have a whole range of other things. You want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's really exciting. So a team of us have been working on developing a new subject choice for Year 9 students, which we're calling Future Thinking. When we actually spoke to the students, was interesting. I was sitting with Barry. I said, look, we've got to get some feedback on the name, because we want students to even just initially be attracted to it. And the students said, future thinking, wonders of tomorrow. And I actually really love that second part of that subject title, because it means it's the wonders of tomorrow. It's the thing that's happening next, right? And so as part of this subject, students will be learning about artificial intelligence, but they'll also be looking at and analysing other future-focused topics. So things like personalised medicine, looking at wearable technologies, autonomous vehicles. Kate, you mentioned metaverses. That's also going to be included there too. Augmented reality, virtual reality. So
NFTs,
cryptocurrencies, definitely. You can attend, see what you can, get your hardware running.
Can we create our own Westbourne Bitcoin or something like that?
I would hope so. Westcoin. But look, it's looking at all of those topics and unpacking the societal implications for them. As part of that, we also want to bring in some fiction and non-fiction multimodal text. So bringing in books, of course, but let's actually look at texts that students are engaging with on a day-to-day basis. Let's bring in YouTube videos. Let's bring in podcasts. Let's bring in TikToks. Let's look at video games. Video games are such a powerful medium now for storytelling and for looking at thematic ideas and societal messages. It's all there. So we'll bring in movies, TV shows, so we'll have that as part of it alongside all of these other future-focused topics. So it's not a coding subject. That definitely has a place as important. It's not necessarily so much of using the technology. That might be part of it, though, because students will have choice and have some autonomy to it. So it's a building block that they'll then go on to do things, but really looking at those future focused topics and the implications, which is really exciting.
We could literally keep going on for hours on this subject, and I think we need to continue the conversation in another episode, but I need to maybe put a pause on it just so we don't go off the rails, and keep it to under an hour, and probably just wrap it up and say thank you very much for the Teagan and Liam joining us, Adrian as always. But this whole journey that we're on with this podcast is to dive into the myriad elements of how this technology is affecting us as adults, but also young people as they go through education and learning. And I think we've touched on some really wonderful points in the conversation. So thank you. Looking forward to our next run. But this has been Future Ready Education. Thanks to Teagan, Liam, Adrian, as always, and tune in for the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Large Learning. As we continue to navigate this transformative era, it's essential for educators, parents, and learners to be informed and engaged in the conversation. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our next episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and thank you for being part of our Large Learning community.